Hello, we are back with the outlining journey. Yesterday, I started outlining my book, like legit outlining, which was super exciting. It's nice seeing everything kind of start coming together and having it start looking like more of an actual book, more of an actual story. I'm starting to get hit a little bit with the "this is stupid, why are you doing this, no one cares, imposter syndrome," that whole dealio, but we're fighting through because that's just what you gotta do. Yesterday I outlined chapters 1 through 4, but I realized in doing that the thing I forgot to do, the thing I forgot to like take a step back to finish, was actually outlining the main like quest thing that they have to do in the game. So I paused the chapter outlining, aka the scene outlining, and I started brainstorming what I wanted to do for the quest. Which was a little bit difficult because I haven't really fleshed out the world a ton. I've kind of learned to accept this about my progress, but my world building comes in a lot heavier in revisions than it does in the initial prepping idea work / draft 1. Because of that, I was kind of struggling with what to do with the quest since I don't know what this game world is super well. I had a vague idea though, and what I did was I drew some inspiration from D&D specifically, not in like the quest itself or the monsters, but in how people create D&D like campaigns and arcs. So I've done a little bit of research about this previously because I play D&D and I've been curious and interested in DMing my own game before, and so kind of as a part of that I've looked into how to craft a interesting and a compelling D&D campaign. So I took some of what I already knew and then did a little bit more searching myself. I came across this sort of formula of how to create a dungeon crawl, which if you don't play D&D, a dungeon crawl is essentially the characters go to a place and they have to make their way through this dungeon or like a cave system or whatever. Like this can be reskinned into really any sort of quest, but historically D&D was about going to a cave, going to a dungeon, and just clearing it of monsters essentially, and doing battle, that kind of stuff. But I found this sort of formula and I found it so interesting. I'll tell you why. But basically, room 1 is entrance and a guardian. So a lot of times in D&D, this will be like, okay, you arrive at the dungeon, you arrive at the cave, there's lookouts, you have to like get past the 2 goblins that are guarding the door, that kind of thing. Room number 2 is a puzzle or a role-playing challenge. This is just sort of to mix it up and have the players use different skills. Room number 3 is a red herring. So that can be that they think that they know who's behind it all, or they think they've reached the big bad, but they haven't actually reached the big bad yet. Room number 4 is climax / the big battle or conflict. This is where they do find the big bad. This is the epic final battle where all of it comes together. And then room number 5 is a plot twist. So maybe this like puts the characters you've interacted with in a new light. Maybe you find out that the townsperson who charged you with going on this quest in the first place was actually doing it for selfish reasons and you aided them in that on accident. Something like that. It's just kind of a twist at the end to put the quest you just went on in a new perspective. And as someone who's currently reading Into the Woods, like I mentioned, which is primarily about 5-act structure, I found this so super interesting. This 5-room dungeon model is what it's called. Just mirrors so well 5-act structure for story. And it's just another manifestation of how no matter what we're doing, humans always come back to this like shape of story. But I found it super helpful also because, like I mentioned, I'm testing out 5-act structure with this book, and so it fit perfectly. It literally fits so perfectly in my outline that I had so far, because basically then every act is just another section of the dungeon. The quest isn't a dungeon, but the shape of the way that they're solving this quest, like it fits so perfectly. It was like a built-in answer to what I was looking for. And from there, all I needed to do was basically decide, okay, what's this quest really about? And I fiddled around with a few options for that, and I landed on one that is kind of reflective of my main character's misbelief. And so yeah, I'm excited in the way that it kind of fit in. But from there, I was able to outline the first 4 chapters pretty easily, actually. now that I had this kind of like external shape to what was happening. And today it is time to do the next 4 chapters. So after today, I should be halfway through with outlining my book, and then by Friday I'll be done. Wow, crazy. And I'm done outlining chapter 8. I had a little bit of a hiccup there at the end. My chapter 7 like wasn't super working well, but what I did, just because like the chapter itself didn't really have its own arc, if that makes sense. Like I had one scene, but I felt like there was some space, like it wasn't going to take up as much space as it needed to. But what I did was I moved one of the scenes from chapter 8 into chapter 7 because I kind of realized that chapter 8 was getting bloated, and what I had at the beginning of chapter 8 works well as a sort of resolution for chapter 7 while also being like a hook into chapter 8 because it sets up what happens in the next chapter. Anyways, these are just the problems that you have to work out in this stage. So far, my plan for the quest is working well. I had a few more ideas today of things to add to it, which spiced things up a little bit. I'm feeling a little bit more of that imposter syndrome, and I'm really hoping that by the time I finish this outline, I'll feel a lot better about the story, enough that it doesn't hinder me next week when I start to draft, because I really do want to get this thing drafted like super fast. I can tell though it is imposter syndrome and not that there's actually a problem with what's going on here, just because of the way that it feels. I don't know, there's a different feeling for me when it's just me feeling not confident in myself and not confident in my own work versus when I have a feeling like something's not working. What I have is working. There's a few things, you know, it's not perfect. It's never gonna be perfect at the beginning, but I'm okay with that. I just need to like make my brain shut up and stop telling me that it sucks. Okay, it is officially the last day of my outlining work. Today I'm going to be outlining the second half of my book. Technically, I was supposed to outline 4 chapters yesterday, but I did not in fact do that. I went to a coffee shop with a friend to do some work, and I ended up just working on other things because, I don't know, my brain space wanted to not think about the outline. I think that's okay though, because I'm pretty confident I can outline the last 8 chapters today, and it gave me a chance to kind of sit back and reflect on, you know, everything and just kind of let what I have so far settle a little bit more. But yes, this morning I've been doing some householdy things just to kind of like, you know, get in the zone, start thinking about the story as I'm cleaning, start getting a little bit active, because I feel like sometimes whenever I wake up and then just immediately sit down to write or work on things, like my brain just like is super lethargic. So I figured I would give it some time to wake up, and now that it's more awake, it's time to sit down and actually do some outlining work. I think probably also part of the reason why I didn't work on this yesterday was because, I don't know, I'm getting nervous to draft again. I'm supposed to start drafting on Monday. Today's Friday. And I think yesterday I was kind of just procrastinating on the outline a little bit. I do like legit need to finish it today because I do not want to push back my deadline. Ideally, I would really like this to be the first book that I've actually like set a good deadline for that I can follow through on. I was able to do that with my Project Shadows revisions, and I really want to do that with drafting now. So we're gonna get the outline done today no matter what. So let's get to work and get this thing finished. The outline. That's exciting. The end, we all know how I am with ends. I think this is good, but there's no way to tell until I actually start writing it, because apparently I always think my ends are good in my outlines, and then I start to write them and I'm like, wow, this sucks. I need to change anything and everything. We'll see. I'm hoping that this works though, because I really do like the way it kind of ties everything together. I like the way everything plays out. So hopefully that translates into the actual like drafting of the book. Also, I don't think I mentioned it, but please excuse the mess again. The window people still have not come, so low-key I might put everything back, because as soon as I put everything back, they're gonna come. Anyways, it's about noon right now, so I'm gonna go get some lunch, and then I will be back to kind of talk over everything that I did / everything that I personally need in order to start a book. I just want to like explain my process a little bit in case that is interesting or helpful, and then we'll wrap up the vlog. Okay, I am fed and we are back to talk about outlining. I've talked about this before on my channel, but I am definitely a plotter by nature, and so I like to have a fair amount of guideposts along the way as I draft my books, because I found that whenever I just pants, whenever I go into a book without a plan, I meander so much that I lose my way and I lose my vision for what I want the story to be. So that's kind of just how I approach writing books and approach what I want to accomplish in the planning stage. My plotting methods have evolved with each book, but I think I'm starting to kind of hone in on the things that are helpful to me, and I'm starting to learn what I know I can use over and over again to like get me the results that I want. So if I were to describe my outlining / planning method in one way, it would really be about just building off of different building blocks. Each step in this process for me is sort of like, I don't know, laying down the first layer of Legos, and then after that we lay down the second and the third and the fourth until we have like the structure that we're looking for. I say we, me, I, an individual, am doing this, not a we. So to briefly go over how that kind of played out for this book, the first thing that I started with for Project Game was theme. I knew the type of character that I wanted to write about, and I knew the lesson that I wanted them to learn in the end. And then through evaluating the stuff that I personally really loved in middle school, I knew premise, or not maybe premise, but framework / genre. I knew I wanted to write a portal fantasy, and I knew some specifics about how I wanted what type of portal fantasy I wanted to write. So those are kind of like the first building blocks. From there, now every idea that I have, I'm checking in against, is this going to get me the theme / emotional resonance that I want it to in the end? And is this going to get me the story that I want to write? After that, I just jump into nebulous brainstorming area. I'm kind of just writing down any ideas I initially have, and really what I'm doing here is I'm asking myself questions. So for example, it's a portal fantasy, and I decided the portal that I wanted was a virtual reality MMORPG game. And so I just sort of started asking myself, okay, what about that is appealing to me? What sort of things do I want to include in my book that relate to this gaming system or style or type of game? So I just was kind of like listing some stuff out. Like I didn't know what I wanted the game to be. I just knew I wanted it to be a fantasy game. And so I started just kind of like Googling names of stuff that exists in that realm right now and getting ideas for names for my game. I went to the thesaurus because thesaurus is size. What's the plural of thesaurus? Either way, it's helpful. And so that kind of helped me land on a name. And the name is sort of what opened up what the world was. It sort of gave me a hint of like what this game actually was, which is weird because normally I do that in the opposite. Normally when I'm thinking of story related stuff, I think of what I want the thing to be and then I name it based off of that. I really struggle with names, so I very rarely come up with the name first. But that was what happened in this case. And then in the midst of this, I'm also working on a mood board, which I posted on my Instagram story. Sorry, I haven't actually posted it. So this is my mood board for Project Game that I came up with. And again, this is all, I'm starting to consider all of this work a part of the outlining process because it's me taking the steps in order to get to the outline right now. As I'm like gathering all of these elements, there are a few story ideas that are coming to me during this. So the first like solid outlining work that I do is I go straight to Story Genius, because Story Genius is very character centric, and I really like writing very character-centric novels. So I sort of just went through the Story Genius process again, building my main character, building what she wants, and how that can be demonstrated in this story. And going through Story Genius really helped me nail down the internal arc of my character. It gave me a few things about the external arc, but it didn't give me enough. I find that even though I really enjoy Story Genius and I think it's a really great resource, it's not enough for me as a plotter because it's very internally focused and it's all focused on like pre-book stuff. So it's talking about your character's backstory a little bit more because that's supposed to inform the novel itself. But Lisa Crone is an anti-plotter gang, so she does not encourage you to sit down and make an outline first. What she wants you to do is scene by scene, write the scene, fill out a scene card, figure out what comes next, and have that this happens and so this happens be kind of the driving force of how you write the novel. That's simply not going to work for my brain. So I need a lot more detail about the external arc after I go through Story Genius, which is when I turn to Save the Cat, because Save the Cat is one of the more basic structure forms, and it's a structure form that I feel really comfortable in because I've used it a lot. So I kind of took what I had about the internal arc and I transposed it onto the Save the Cat beats, just to sort of line up where everything is happening. In this, I had like maybe 70% of the beats. I didn't have anything for Fun and Games or Bad Guys Close In because those are the two like big Act 2 beats, and because I didn't know a lot about the external arc, I didn't know what was going to be happening for those like sections. I also skipped kind of the opening and final image and the theme stated, mainly because again, like I'm still trying to figure out a lot of external stuff, and so I don't know externally how I want to show where my character is. Even though I know where my character is at the beginning and end, I still wasn't sure how to demonstrate that externally. So I put the internal arc in Save the Cat. In this, you know, I'm kind of getting a few external ideas, so I'm adding those. And I'm basically, like, in the setup, I'm listing all the things that I know I need to set up, like, all that kind of stuff. I'm not really talking about scenes specifically right now. I'm just kind of listing information that I know goes in each beat. And while I was working on this was whenever I watched that Lizelle Sambury video, again, that is linked down below. And so that character profile sort of became my next building block. It really helped me solidify some of the external things that I was missing, and it gave me like the one last little external piece that I was missing before I felt like I had a cohesive external story. So with that, I was able to finish filling out with some specifics in Fun and Games and Bad Guys Close In, specifically about the subplots and, you know, if they're negative or positive arcs. And then after that, I felt like I was ready to jump to an actual outline. So with my outline, the way that I started was I figured out how many chapters I wanted it to be. This is very vibes based. It's very, there's no rhyme or reason. I just felt like it was going to be a 16 chapter book based off the word count and based off how long-ish I wanted the chapters to be. So I wrote out my 16 chapters, and then in each one I kind of gave a little short snippet or a sentence of what the central conflict of that chapter is going to be. And then once I had something that made sense for every chapter, that's whenever I went back in and started adding scenes and started figuring out, okay, how is this going to play out actually in the narrative? And doing this, again, I think I mentioned, I quickly realized I needed to go back to my planning stuff. So I went back in order to figure out what the quest that they were participating in was. And that way I kind of had that final little bit of external action that I could then use for the rest of the outline. And then the rest of the outline went pretty smoothly. Oh, I forgot to add that I had wrote the synopsis and a short little summary. This was kind of at the same time as I was doing the Save the Cat stuff, just to sort of get a sense of the shape of the story. Between the Save the Cat, the synopsis, the Story Genius, and my quest outline, it was really easy for me then to just go chapter by chapter and figure out what the scenes were, because at this point, I'm not doing the deciding work in the outline of what happens. I've already done all the deciding work, and now the outline is just to like put it in one cohesive place in a way that makes sense. And then as I was going through the scenes, I was clarifying what exactly happens in little scene summaries. So my outline for Project Game is 11 pages. Technically it's like 10 pages, and then like a little bit of the last scene goes on to the 11th page. I will show you a little bit of an example of how I like to outline over here. So I mentioned I was using Into the Woods, the 5-act structure for this book. So I have essentially 3 chapters in each act. Acts 3 through 4 are essentially your act 2 of 3-act structure. So 3 is like the midpoint, 2 is the fun and games, and 4 is the bad guys close in, essentially. So I had all of that. I also was able to note where, what quest stuff is happening right under the act, because my quest structure also mirrors my act structure as well, and the story structure, and that was on purpose. And then under that I have chapter, and then again right next to it kind of that little summary of the central action or conflict, and then under that I have any scenes that go into that chapter. So I'll have the scene title, and then I bullet point 3 things. I note which characters are in this, specifically important characters. I then give a short summary about what the scene is, what's happening in the scene, just to kind of like, again, get the shape of the scene, get the shape of the arc. And then at the very bottom, note what the purpose of the scene is. So I always want to be checking into not only the external structure, but the internal story of my character as well, to make sure that every scene is contributing to my character's growth across the novel. And that's about it. I just do that for every scene that's in the chapter, and there you go. You have an outline. So I hope that little overview was helpful. That's kind of how I got from point A of the idea to point B of having a pretty detailed outline. I'm like building those building blocks, and the outline is just another building block in order to now start drafting. It's the building block that lets me leap into drafting, and then each scene is going to be the building block to making the first draft. I'm excited and nervous to start drafting on Monday, but now that I have a finished outline, I'm feeling a little bit more confident about that. Today is February 11th, so my plan was to start drafting on February 14th, and then my due date for draft 0 is April 8th. So that gives me all of March, half of February, and like the first week of April. So not quite 2 months, but almost 2 months for drafting draft 0. Let me know down below what your outlining process is like, if you do outline or if you're a pantser. I will definitely keep you guys updated as I work on Project Game. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye!